Welcome everyone. It is now 11 a.m. My name is Dominic Olivo, Program Associate here at IONS, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Carrie Millar from Marketing and Website, and of course, Kim Aubrey, COO of the Inquiry Institute, and Marilee Adams, PhD. This special Conscious Aging webinar recording will be made available, and we will send out a follow-up email with the details. So I wanted to just do a few notes on the Zoom technology before we begin. So during this webinar, we will ask you to utilize Zoom's chat feature to type in your reflections and responses. You can utilize the chat feature by clicking on the chat icon on your Zoom menu bar here at the bottom. And as you will notice, when we're sharing our screens, your Zoom menu bar may disappear. To get it back, you would simply click on the escape key, and that would re-minimize your Zoom window, so your Zoom menu bar will pop up. Or if you're on a smartphone, you may have to tap your screen to bring it up. Also, we'll be utilizing the raising hand feature of Zoom. So if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, we ask that you raise your Zoom hand. This allows us to see how many people are in the queue. And to raise your Zoom hand, simply go to the participants button here. By clicking on the participants button, it'll open up the participants window, and you can move your cursor down to the bottom right of this window to raise and lower your hand. And as you can see here, for an example, Lisa has her hand up here. And now that we have all the technical aspects out of the way, I'm happy to now introduce today's wonderful presenter, Marilee Adams. So Marilee is an author, organizational consultant, and facilitator, executive coach, and professional speaker. She is the CEO and president of the Inquiry Institute International, a solutions company providing consulting, coaching, training, keynotes, and e-learning worldwide. Marilee is an adjunct professor in the School of Public Affairs at American University in the Key Executive Leadership Program, and an affiliate instructor for Weatherhead Executive Education at Case Western University. She is also faculty for the Institute for Life Coach Training and Expedition Coaching. Marilee is an ACC with the International Coach Federation and also an IONS Circle member, so we're great to have her support. Marilee's published works include books, book chapters, and articles. The book she's best known for is Change Your Questions, Change Your Life, 12 Powerful Tools for Leadership, Coaching, and Life. It's an international bestseller in 24 languages and also an Amazon #1 bestseller in learning in organizations and business. And I saw a little quote from Marilee that I loved and I wanted to share with you all. It's that Marilee believes that engaging together in open-minded, open-hearted inquiry allows us to experience our innate interconnectedness and collective wisdom. On a practical level, this leads to discovering questions that will make the biggest difference to our individual and collective futures. So great, without further ado, I am pleased to turn this over to you, Marilee.
And I am very pleased to be here. I feel like it was only yesterday I was at the IONS conference in California, but it was last summer. And that quote that Dom just shared, it very much sums up what I love about this material, what I love about the possibilities of it, and why I love the opportunity of being able to contribute it into the Conscious Aging program. So our purpose today is to empower facilitators of IONS Conscious Aging workshops with new ways to strengthen your contribution to participants in the Conscious Aging workshops and beyond. And what I mean by beyond is each of them also contributes to people beyond them. So the one thing we do here, it moves forward. Just to quickly go over what our agenda is for today. And Dom and I are working together today. He's doing the slides and we're partners in this. So we're in the welcome and purpose part. We're going to do a poll in a minute, which I'll tell you about. Then we're going to do something called sacred listening triads, which I'll also tell you about. Then we'll engage in the core of the work. It's about mindsets and how that relates to aging, ageism, and age-fulness. We'll be using the choice map, which some of you have seen. And if you haven't, you'll be getting it in an email after today's session, so you'll all have it. We'll be looking at learner questions, that's learner mindset questions, for aging with consciousness and intention, as well as with positivity, compassion, and connection. We'll do takeaways. We'll be what's next from Inquiry Institute and from IONS. And it's actually going to be a very full hour and a half, which I'm excited to jump into. Now, I said that I mentioned something about the poll. I am very curious to learn about you, and so we're going to do a quick poll, even though I've had lots of conversation with Dom and with Kirsten and with the IONS people at IONS, but I want to know something about you we'll do it in the poll. We're also going to give you an opportunity in what I call the sacred listening triads to share about some things that are going on in your life right now. And I'm doing these things for two reasons. One, I'm really curious. And two, well, you're facilitators. You know that you can't get much worthwhile done with people if you're not connected and related, and if they haven't had an opportunity to share what they need to share to be present. So that's why we're doing those two parts to start with. And Dom, let's start with the poll.
Beautiful. Thank you, Marilee. So I'm going to be now launching the poll. A window should pop up for you. So the poll is now launched, and we'll just give it a few moments here. That we have 3 questions, so take your time. And these responses are anonymous, so please feel free to respond candidly.
I'm glad you added that.
Yeah.
I'll say them out loud. The first is, am I worried about COVID or have had it or know others who have? The second one is, do I think that what I learned in the Conscious Aging workshop has been helpful for me personally, including during these challenging times? And the third question is, have I discovered some inspiring upsides to lockdown or stay at home or whatever you want to call it? And for some people, that could include time to be more mindful, to engage in practices that are important to you, and finding new ways to experience connectedness and interconnectedness, both with your families and with your communities. So it's just a yes or no for each of those. And Dom, I think what you can do is give us the totals so we know.
Perfect. Yeah, it looks like most have submitted. I'll just give it one more moment.
Okay.
Great. It looks like we have just about everybody. So I'm going to end the polling now and share the results. So for the first question,
Wow.
it looks like 83% said yes, 17 said no, 2 people. For question 2, 92%, 11 people said yes, and 1 said no.
Great.
And for 3, about discovering some surprising upsides to this lockdown, 83%, 10 people said yes, and 2 people said no.
Okay. I am particularly thrilled about number 2, because what that says is what you've experienced and learned and developed for yourself during the Conscious Aging program and the Facilitator program has been meaningful for you personally. And that's the most important place from which you can be leading your workshops. So now we're going to do the sacred listening practice. And this is something some of you may have done, many of you haven't done. So I have a few slides to explain what that is, and then we'll do it. So sacred listening means listening in a way that you grant the other person the grace, space, and goodwill of our generous listening. It requires acceptance, respect, and compassion. Listening to someone this way and being listened to this way is a beautiful gift for the person receiving it, and also important as a practice for all of those who want to become better listeners, which I'm assuming is all of us. And it is not judgmental or critical or adding your opinion. It's just really providing some spaciousness for somebody else to be in. So let's go to the next slide. And when we're listening in this way, we're listening with curiosity and questions like, so we're listening with questions, who is this person really? And what's important to them? And how can I keep my ears and my heart open enough to listen with generosity and caring about what they think, feel, want, and say? How can I be truly present for this other person? So let's go to the next slide. So in a moment, we're going to put you in breakout rooms where I think there'll be 3 people in each room. And these are the 2 questions to address when you're speaking in your breakout rooms. First, what have I been experiencing during COVID-19 for myself and with my family and friends? For some of you, not that much. For others, it may be a great deal and be wonderful to be listened to. And then, what have I learned in the conscious aging program that's helping me during these challenging COVID times? And let's go to the next slide. You're going to have only 3 minutes per person, and you're going to have to self-manage inside the 10 minutes that we're going to give you. So when you're in your rooms, please make sure that each of you has the same amount of time, which is 3 minutes. The first person answers one of the 2 questions on the previous slide, and the other 2 listen with the ear of their heart, with acceptance and generosity, purely being present. So the person who's speaking has experience authentically of being received and heard. So that'll be 3 minutes. Then you can rotate to the second person and then to the third. And Dom, it just occurred to me, can you put the 2 questions into chat so if people want to look at that, they can?
Absolutely, yeah. I'll go back and I'll paste these 2. Oops, sorry.
But they're also simple. What have I been experiencing and how has the conscious aging program helped me during these times?
Great, so I'm sending that to everyone in the chat now. And we'll have roughly 10 minutes. I'm going to open up the invites and I'm going to unmute everyone now. To join the breakout room, simply click on Join Breakout Room on the pop-up window. If the pop-up window does not appear for you, you can also click on Join Breakout Room in the bottom right-hand corner on your menu bar. And if any problems arise, you can click Ask for Help on the bottom menu bar as well. And with today's numbers, we'll have 4 groups of 3 and 1 group will have 2 individuals. And we'll be able to move anyone around if there's any issues with the rooms.
Great. So we'll see you in 10 minutes. So the first thing we're going to do is just a chat, a quick chat. What was your experience of being in an intentional, sacred listening kind of situation? What was it like for you to be listened to in that way and to listen in that way? If you'll just write a few words into chat, and we'll take 4 or 5 just because I want to get a flavor of what the experience was like for you. And Dom will do the honors of reading them.
Beautiful. Yeah, we'll spend some time here. If anyone is having trouble finding the chat feature, it's located on your Zoom menu bar, usually in the bottom right-hand corner. Great, so we have some coming in. It is elevating, acknowledging. It was powerful and I felt heard and appreciated. I felt connected. And it was validating to hear of others' experiences.
Great. Good. That's what I was hoping for. And we do this practice. We've been doing these free Monday night conversations during COVID, and we've included sacred listening in each of them because people find it such a relief and so lovely to be able to be listened to this way. So now, regarding the questions, what you've been experiencing and how is what you learned in conscious aging been useful for you? We have time for maybe 2 shares about that. If anyone would care to do that. And how do they do it, Dom? They'll raise their hand, or you'll unmute them, or
Oh yeah, yeah. If you like to raise your Zoom hand, you can do so by going to the participants button and clicking raise hand in the bottom right, or bottom left, sorry. Also, I'm looking at you all now, so if you raise your real hand, I'll be able to see you as well.
when did analog become real?
Yeah.
So if there's someone who would like to share, and of course you don't have to, if you want to, you can do it
Great.
now, or we'll just move on.
Rosalind raised her hand.
Oh,
Great. Thank you, Rosalind. You are now live. Oh, and Rosalind, I'm having trouble unmuting you, but if you could, there you go.
I
there you
think
are.
there's a pacing and an expansiveness of this kind of spaciousness of thinking. So that I practiced in facilitating the conscious aging, and that I saw the group grow in. There's also the ability to take crises that pop up in your own life. You know, there was always someone who either got an Alzheimer's diagnosis, or there's always someone who got something critical happening during that course, the conscious aging course. And so at the beginning of COVID, I received a cancer diagnosis, and I just, went into that numb kind of panicky, like, this, whose life am I in? This isn't my story. And then when I got through that, there were a lot of the skills from conscious aging that really helped me kind of pull that apart and not have such a global panic about it. Like everything's gone wrong and I have no skills or strengths left. And so I had experienced other people going through that by facilitating the group. And that's been hugely helpful. Yeah. And I would love to, I intend to facilitate the group again, just because it's a gentle way to get that strength and that spaciousness into your life.
That's a beautiful.
And camaraderie too, camaraderie.
So Rosalind, thank you for that. I mean, that could be a beautiful summary for everybody. What you've learned, because it's personal. It always starts with who we're being.
Mm-hmm.
And of course I have to ask, how are you doing now?
Good, great. Yeah, I sometimes feel, all the language is about fighting cancer, and I don't, it doesn't fit for me. Now, I am very fortunate. It was caught early, and I will go through all the various things I have to go through. But so many things I end up receiving as a gift rather than a struggle.
Thank you. That's wonderful. We have time for one more if there is somebody. Otherwise, we'll move on.
Great. If you want to raise your Zoom hand or your real hand, I'm looking out for everybody.
It was like my mother used to say, going, going, gone. So let's move on, because there'll be plenty of opportunity to share later as well. You may have noticed in the agenda, I used the term ageful or agefulness, and it's a term you may not have heard, although frankly, a few weeks ago, I hadn't heard it either. And I was lucky to have Mark Blessoff doing some mentoring for me during my preparation for this. And one of the books that he suggested is This Chair Rocks, a manifesto against ageism. And that term is used in there. So I'm going to riff for a minute on what that means to me, and as sort of a context for all of us to hold together. So ageful. I am full of all the ages I've ever been. I'm full of my experiences, my lessons, my successes, failures, loves, and losses of my whole life, whatever age I am right now. And that gives me a perspective that includes acceptance, forgiveness, kindness, and the possibility of growing wisdom and consciousness. It also, in my interpretation of that term, includes recognizing myself in a much wider sense of relationship, a much wider sense of connecting and interconnectedness of which I'm inherently a part. And that brings a kind of peacefulness and presence, sort of like what Rosalind was just describing, actually. And that's an orientation towards awareness and curiosity and learning and being. Whether I have 30 years left or 30 days left, it comes with the way of being. And because we're going to be talking a lot about learning in a moment, I want to say that learning is not just good for your brain, it's good for your soul. And so, oh, it's very gratifying. Some of you are shaking your head. It just came to me. Learning is good for your brain and it's good for your soul. So that's what I mean by ageful. And you can make any meaning you like because it's a word you can pour yourself into. Now, before we get into the mindset material, I'm going to ask you to imagine something with me and to stretch your imagination. So in terms of connectedness and in terms of embracing the whole of the people who've been in the program and the people who will be in the program and the people who'll be touched by people in the program. So if you'll put your hands over your heart like this till you can feel a little bit of heat in your hand and the rising and lowering of your chest and your breath as you breathe in and out. And now we're going to do something that usually doesn't happen on Zoom screens, which is to take your hands and make a big circle with them. And I'd like for us to imagine, and we can all do this, and it's good exercise if nothing else. So imagine that we're a circle together, and we're in a circle where we can see people and honor them and listen to them and be present together in the container of this webinar. So imagine that we are in this circle, and that develops a different kind of energy and awareness of others. And I've always appreciated being in circles and appreciated and do the energy that comes with that. So now that we've done that, and we're, let's say, secure inside this circle, it's time to explore mindsets and aging and ageism and agefulness. And just a note, what I'm going to be describing is in the book, Change Your Questions, Changed Your Life, with a lot more elaboration on it. And what I say in the book is that we have two mindsets. We have what I call a judger mindset, and we have a learner mindset, and all of us have both. Every single one of us has both. But it's very useful to distinguish the mindsets. And so rather than giving you a description first, I want to give you an experience first. And the way I'm going to do that is simply recite two sets of questions, one from one mindset and one from the other. And your only job is to listen and allow the questions to impact you. So I'd like you to notice the impact. Your breathing, your body, your physiology, your level of stress or relaxation, any thoughts that float by. And it'll take very little time to do each of them. So I'm going to start with this mindset, and I'm going to recite some questions, and I'm going to recite them in first person singular, so you can listen to them as if you're asking them of yourself. So here are some of those questions. What's wrong with me? Why do I always have such bad luck? How did I get stuck with this in-law, this situation, this email? Why is everyone around me so clueless and frustrating? What's wrong that I can't do all the things I used to do? Why do so many people treat me like I'm old and incapable? Why bother? So, if you'll go to chat and just type in a few words that summarize how you felt when I was reciting those questions. What did you feel? Just 1 or 2 word descriptions. And then Dom will read some of them out.
Beautiful. I see less than okay, filled with victim energy. One said I held my breath, down, depressing, and self-focused, me, permanent and negative.
Oh, that's a good summary. Well, I'm happy to tell you, I've done this exercise with many thousands of people all over the world, and those questions, those responses are exactly consistent with what they say. They also say, could you please give me another set of questions? And so I am going to give you another set of questions. So now you can listen newly to these. What do I want? What are my goals? What's working? What can I learn from this person or situation? What's the other person thinking, feeling, and wanting? What's going to put more life into my life today? How can I expand my sense of satisfying connection with other people and with the world around me? What's possible? Okay, so go back to chat. And what happened to you? What did you experience as I asked those questions?
Great, and I see positive and compassionate and optimistic. I see inspired and openness, and energizing and affirming, and curiosity and possibility.
Well, you're right in line with those all thousands of people. So we're going to call these judger questions, and this is from judger mindset. We're going to call these learner questions. This is from learner mindset. And as you could see, the questions we ask ourselves and the mindset from which we ask those questions has an enormous impact on how we're feeling. Now I'm just going to ask a moment of truth, and I can see you. So raise your hand if you ever ask any of these questions, the judger questions. And every one of you should be raising your hand because we all do. Okay, good, thank you. And how many of us ask these questions, the learner questions? Again, raise your hands. You would never be facilitating this program if that weren't the case. So it raises an interesting question. If we all ask these questions and we all ask these questions, what's the big deal? The big deal is that the questions we ask ourselves and the mindset from which we ask them shape how we think, how we feel, how we behave, how we relate, and ultimately the results that we get in life. Most of the time, these questions are just kind of running around in our heads. Sometimes it's a judger one, sometimes it's a learner one, then there are 2 judger ones. So it's a question of whether we're in control of our questions or our questions are in control of us. Most of the time, frankly, our questions are in control of us. At the moment that we can begin to distinguish the 2 mindsets and the 2 different sets of questions, at that moment, we get to be awake and we get to say, oh, was that a judger question or a learner question? Is this question going to be life-giving or life-draining? So we get to be observers of our thinking, hence Change Your Questions, Change Your Life is the name of the book. And now we're doing Change Your Questions, Change Your Aging. So you can see that once we can observe the questions that are in control of us, we can get in some control, not total absolute control ever, but we can begin to manage our thinking, our feeling, our relating, and that is a very powerful thing. So I want to describe to you a little bit about each of the mindsets, and we'll come up with that other slide, which is the mindset summary. So when we're in learner mindset, and we're in learner and judger, as I said, sometimes it changes minute by minute. When we're in learner, we're more open-minded, curious, accepting, positive, possibility-oriented. Learner is associated with feeling connected, with having a future orientation, with win-win relating, with wabi-sabi, which I was really pleased to see is in the program, and with age-fulness. When we're in judger, and we will always go to judger from time to time, we are neurologically hardwired for it. It's just the way it is. When we're in judger, we're more closed-minded, negative, pessimistic, feel separate, need certainty, and are oriented with fear. It's associated with win-lose relating and orientation to the past, and frankly, with ageism. And remember, we all have both. So what's really wonderful about this, and we could go to the next slide, Dom. Thanks. What's wonderful about this is that when we can distinguish the two mindsets and the questions that go with them, it gives us a way to manage ourselves. And you'll see the choice map underneath it, in the left corner, it says we choose moment by moment. So I'm simply going to give you a quick description of it, and I'd like you to study it if you can on this. You do not need to look at all the questions. And you're going to have the choice map after today, so you'll be able to use it as a reference and as a guide for yourself. So you've heard the expression, it's not what happens to you that matters, it's what you do next. The choice map is an illustration of that. It's a personal empowerment tool for awareness and for change and for relationship. So if you look at the figure on your left, on the start arrow, it says things happen to us all the time. Circumstances are occurring all the time and we have thoughts and feelings. That's what happens to us. Next, we either go judger or we go learner. So let's take judger first, partly because it's the default position. We are wired for judger just because we're wired for protection and survival. That's part of our brain. And nevertheless, if we stay on the judger path long enough, we end up in what our students and participants call the famous judger pit. And I am certain that none of us, I know not me, has ever not been in the judger pit. We've all gotten muddy, and sometimes we've gotten very muddy there. And you see it says judger is automatic and reactive, it's blame-oriented, and it's win-lose relating. That relates to what I was just describing about the mindsets. Also, if you could see the questions, you would notice that some of them are directed to myself. What's wrong with me? Others are directed to others. So when I say judger, I am actually referring to being judgmental. I am not referring to good judgment, discernment, evaluation, any of that. I'm talking about being judgmental, and you call that critical. So I think all of us have some familiarity with being judgmental towards ourselves and critical, and with others, and it starts with how we think. So go back to the start. We could also take the learner path, and you heard the questions and you have your own experience now of the difference for yourself of being on the judger path and being on the learner path. And the billboard up there says learner, thoughtful choices, solution focused, win-win relating. And notice that the learner path intentionally goes off the side of the road, off the side of the map. And that's because when we're in learner, we can be in possibility, and there's always a different future. So the future from learner is unlimited, as are possibilities. The future from judger, which is past oriented, is simply recycled versions of the same. So at any moment, you could look at the choice map and say, what mindset am I in? And you're always going to be in one or the other. The saving grace and what makes the choice map so practical is the switching lane. And you see the sign that says switch, ask learner questions to avoid the judger pit. So we are inevitably going to fall into judger. The moment we can wake up and say, am I in judger? Now here's the caveat. To ask yourself, am I in judger non-judgmentally? Just, am I wearing a blue top? Yes. Am I in judger? Yes. For it to be information is really useful, because then you can go ahead and ask yourself what I call switching questions. Starts always with, am I in judger? Do I like how I'm feeling or what I'm doing? How else can I think about this? And really, who do I choose to be in this moment? Which for me is, it's like the switching question that always stops me if I'm busy running down the judger path. So before I go on, are there any questions about the choice map? Because I want to illustrate some things on it for you. If you have a question, you could put it in chat or not.
Right.
What I want to do is tell you a story that's a switching story. And a switching story is, I was in judger, I switched, I ended up in learner over and over and over again. Just like if you find yourself in judger, doing some of the internalized ageism that you've been that you've learned about in the course, and that I'm sure all of us experience a bit, you can say, am I in judger? If the answer is yes, what switching question could I ask to get to learner? Now, there were some chat comments.
Yeah, we had a few
went
questions.
So fast, I didn't see them. What were they?
Yeah, it says, you say we're neurologically wired for judger. What is evolutionary benefit of judger?
Oh, that's a great question. The evolutionary benefit is it's there for our protection and survival. It's the primitive part of the brain, and it's what you may have heard the term fight, flight, or flee, that the judger tells us that. Now, of course, when our brains got built a long, long time ago, and there were actual physical threats, we needed to fight, flight, or flee. Today, something that scares us may not be physical, but might still put us into judger. And in fact, I can illustrate that on the choice map, because the judger mindset is associated with that part of the brain so it's the amygdala, and it's also the sympathetic nervous system, and it's wired for that. And it's a good thing it is. So that's why I often call the judger mindset the fear mindset, and the learner mindset, which is the parasympathetic nervous system, is the possibility mindset. All of us have some reactivity, and a lot of this work that we do with people in so many different ways but comes down to the core of being able to notice when we're being reactive, to recenter and gather ourselves, to switch, and to be able to go into learner. And in fact, I'm certain that every person in this call today, in this webinar, has taken the switching lane many times, and you've also trained yourself to do that. So if you've been trained in mindfulness, if you meditate, if you do Tai Chi, as I do, many of the things that you have studied and learned are things that help move us from judger to learner. And that's the beauty of being able to see the map, because you're actually seeing an illustration of what you do all the time and what you've trained yourselves in. In fact, when you facilitate a conscious aging workshop, you cannot afford to ever be in judger, or at least you've got to catch yourself very quickly, because when you facilitate, people are going to come up with things that could trigger you. And when you've gained the ability to, you've got a trained instinct, which is different than reactivity, different than automaticity. When you've trained yourself to be asking switching questions, and switching is not just questions, by the way, switching is also somatic. So it isn't just that we ask switching questions, but we actually alter the mood in our bodies and the climate in our bodies. But everybody who's involved in IONS has been involved in practices that strengthen our resilience, our adaptability, our flexibility, and our ability to be present, not knocked over by something that's somebody says or does, but simply to be present. Was there anything else, Tom, about the choice map?
Yeah, there's a few. Joanne shared that a lot of her experience with family is that she's asking a learner question and that they think that she's judging them, which puts them in a judging mode.
Yeah, we hear that a lot. So I have like 4 ways I can go with that one. Lots of times people don't like being asked questions, which is why Kim and I will always have a business because we're training people to ask learner questions. But a lot of people don't like to be asked questions, and they have something we call question reluctance. And it's easy to know if you have question reluctance. Just simply ask yourself, have I ever been in a situation, personal or professional, and had an important question to ask and I didn't? Raise your hand if that's true so I can see you. That's all of us. So that's question reluctance. So sometimes we can ask a question, and just the fact that we're asking a question could make somebody else feel defensive or like on the spot, and then there is the nature of the question itself. So my best quick, and it's quick for today, is to keep putting yourself back into learner, keep returning yourself to learner. So if something you say or do triggers somebody else to be in judger, the most important thing you can do is stay in learner yourself. If you end up going judger on their judger, then you're in the mud pit together. And I'm not saying this casually, like it's easy, but it is fundamental to being able to be present with what's ever. And then sometimes you come back and you ask the question again. So if I had more specificity, or we could role play this, or I could coach you with it, then I could do more with it. But that's enough for right now. And thank you for that. And was there something else before I move on?
Yeah, if you had time, we have one more question from James about suspicion. About if the question suspicion, why are you asking me that? And how to respond to that.
If they're not used to you asking questions from learner, they may well say that. And this is at home and at work. We do a lot of work in government agencies and businesses, and so I'm used to hearing that a lot. But it can happen at home. And actually part of my early career, 25 years, was as a psychologist and a family therapist. And the first book I wrote was a textbook in psychology. And so this can certainly happen at home too. So there are a couple things here. One is be clear about your own intention when you ask a question. 2, whatever response you get, be graceful in accepting it. 3, don't push people to answer if they don't want to. 4, sometimes if you have a challenging or difficult question, you can set it up by saying, I have a question to ask you. it's a little difficult. Is this a good time to ask you? Or may I ask you? So once somebody has given you their permission for a question exchange, then you have a lot better possibility. And I could say a lot more, but the first thing is make sure your own intention. Oh, and then the other thing is, if you think that there's some suspicion, however it's being expressed, you can simply get curious and ask them a question about what do you think I was looking for? If you do this from learner, you can't do this from judger. But if you say, what did you think I was looking for? Or should I explain what I was looking for? Or how could I phrase that would make more sense to you? So now you're in a partnership with the other person, so you can be like this together and not like this together. And of course, like this together is what you're looking for if you want to have the kind of communication and collaboration that leads to being connected and compassionate. I did see a comment that went right past the bottom of my screen that somebody said, learner mindset is like beginner's mindset. That is true. Learner mindset is like beginner's mindset. So thank you. Let me tell you a switching story, and it may evoke more questions and more responses. And we're probably not gonna have time for Q&A because there's a lot left to go. But you can always email me afterwards. So if we don't get to your question and you have something that's important, make sure you email me and then we can handle it. Because I don't want anybody leaving here going, I wanted to know this, or I wanted to ask that or say that. So I'd be very happy to get your emails, and we'll give you information about that. So my husband is a psychologist, a writer, a poet, an artist, and his office, one of his offices, is at home. He's downstairs, I'm upstairs. You can see my roof here. And so one day I was walking by his office, and he goes like this. I came in, he has this huge smile on his face, and he says, I just wrote a haiku, and I sent it off to be published, or I sent it off to a magazine to be published. Now, what I'm going to illustrate for you happened in a nanosecond. I'm going to draw it out so you can see it. So he said something that triggered my judger big time. And internally, I'm going, you what? You wrote a haiku and you sent it off without showing it to me first? You always share things with me. What's wrong? Fortunately, I have been training myself for years in switching. So, and it's like building a muscle, and I've built this muscle over many, many years. Fortunately, I was able to catch myself, like, Marilee, are you in judger? I'm going, are you kidding? But the real question is, as I said before, who do I choose to be in this moment? And that question I have so trained into my brain, into my being, that it's there for me most of the time. So literally in a nanosecond, I was able to say to him authentically, not just say it, but say it authentically. Well, that's wonderful, sweetheart. I'd love to see it. And then I got out of there as fast as I could. And I got into the kitchen and I went, wow, that was a quick save. Because imagine for a moment if I hadn't. If I had acted out the judger reactivity that was first, it would have affected trust. It would have affected his willingness to risk, to share. There were all kinds of things that negative that could have happened in our relationship. Now, if that happens just a few times, because it will to all of us a few times, no big deal. It's not the theme. If it happens a lot in a relationship, And that means any relationship with anybody, so that we start accumulating a lot of judger, then it really impacts the relationship. So it comes back to the very simple, but also very deep and actually personally profound ability to notice when we're in judger and to switch moment by moment by moment. Will we ever be perfect? We will absolutely not ever be perfect. But the more that you practice this, the more you practice noticing your mindset. And as you all know, awareness is first. So awareness of my mindset. Am I in judger? Yes. Do I want to be? Do I like how I'm feeling? Do I like what I'm doing? How else can I think about this? Who do I choose to be in this moment with this person? That is a fundamental capacity and built skill that will make a difference for us in every moment, in every situation for the rest of our lives, really. So I teach the same work inside of leadership training for the last 10 years, inside of working with teams and with organizations. I use it in coaching all the time. Change Your Questions, Change Your Life is a story about a coach, and it has all of this methodology kind of baked into and integrated into the story. And it makes a profound difference to be able to take up residence in learner and visit judger from time to time, as we all will. But the more that you practice this simple work, the more robust your learner will be, and the more resilient, adaptable, flexible, connected, and frankly, happy. It also reinforces positivity. So, before we go on, let's see if there are any questions or anything that anybody wants to ask or comment on about this, particularly in relation to being, as I said, judger is ageism, and learner we're going to call ageful.
Yeah, we had a few comments that came in. Berta shared that Mark Nepo
I love
suggests
Mark Nepo, yeah.
Nepo. Oh, perfect. He suggests that we ask ourselves, how am I being where I am, to increase our awareness and our mindset, emotional state.
He has some wonderful books, and I strongly recommend him. He's wonderful. I find myself underlining everything. Thank you for that. I haven't seen that particular quote. I'll look for it. Who else?
Let's see, if you'd like to raise your Zoom hand or your real hand, I'm keeping an eye out.
Question is, how could you imagine using the choice map as a personal guide, as a personal empowerment tool? Most of us we're either home alone or we're home with their families. That can be paradise, or it can be quite the opposite, depending on whether we're in a judger atmosphere or a learner atmosphere. How could this make a difference there? How could it make a difference in how you be with yourself and with the participants in your courses? So what I'd like to do is give you about 30 seconds to write. So I'm not going to speak for 30 seconds, and I want you to write some reflections on that question. So the question, someone said, say the question again. How could you imagine using the workshop as a personal empowerment tool for yourself in your personal life, in your life as a facilitator? And I'll also say, I have a handy dandy little choice map right here, that you could take almost any situation. I do this all the time in coaching. So the situation is here. Typically, if people are having a problem with something, they've gone down here, and we can trace out the entire conversation and change their possibilities by having them think about, what are the judger questions I'm asking of myself and others? How am I behaving in judger? If in fact that individual wants to switch, because we don't always want to switch, what could I be doing on the learner path instead? You could do this at the kitchen table just as well as you could do it in a team meeting in an organization or in a coaching session. So now could we hear just a few comments? Oops, they're going so fast. Would you read them, please?
Yeah, of course. Yolanda shared that I can choose who I want to be in any situation. I have been really struggling with judging my roommate in this time. This is a good reminder to switch paths.
Remember, it's a moment by moment journey. That's great. And I saw some other comments, Don.
Yeah, I feel every conscious aging workshop as a gift, even as others receive it as a gift. And James shared that it can help me promote more resilience and positive energy building.
Great, great. You'll be getting a PDF of the choice map in the email after today. And I invite you to print it out, post it, and study it. Many people put it on their refrigerators and keep referring back to it, use it even as the basis of family conversations. And we're all with their families a lot. And Dom, there was one other comment that flew by. What was that?
Yeah, Joanne shared that it helps remind me that being a teacher is basically the challenge of being a learner always.
Oh, that's beautiful. It's really true. Let's go on to the next slide. Oh, wait a minute. Reframing mindful in my daily family life, observing, judge your thought, pausing and choosing to change. Yeah, I do think of it as a mindfulness tool. It's a mindfulness tool for myself. And in relationship or in the moment of relating, it can be mindful for us to share together. And it becomes very practical that way. Let's go to the next slide, and then we'll have time for some conversation afterwards. So past that, past switching questions. So, no, back up. The noetic possibilities in aging and agefulness. I mentioned that Mark has been mentoring me a little bit. He sent me one of his blogs, and I took some of this and then added some things to it from a blog that he sent me. So in later stages of life, we approach the possibility of integration and equanimity and wisdom, all of which are aspects of noetics. There is often a feeling of cosmic awareness and a redefinition of time, space, life, and death. An increased feeling of affinity with others, the earth, and beyond, along with an increased awareness of our similarities and much less on our differences. And all of this allows us to sense the interconnected nature of it all and find a naturalness and comfort in that growing awareness. And Dom will tell you towards the end, but Mark will be giving a workshop on noetic approaches to aging, and I'm certain it'll be integrating all of this. So let's go to the next slide. And I'd like you to, we'll do a chat again. What one word summarizes my experience of this webinar, what I learned, but my experience of it. And then we'll talk together about ahas or new possibilities or questions. So if you go in the chat and say, what was my experience today?
Great, and we have the word reminder. We have expands possibilities. And Maggie shared earlier, remaining mindful in my daily family life, observing judger thought, pausing, and choosing to change path to learner questions. And we have humility,
Mm.
a new tool for coaching and facilitating. It's wonderful. We have self-assurance to positive, and we have truth and
So
presence.
it rings true. Presence. Lovely. So let's, now I'm going to give you an opportunity to write again before we talk. So what ahas or new possibilities do I have as a person who is aging with consciousness and intention, as well as with positivity, compassion, and connection? So I'm going to give you a few moments to write down ahas or new possibilities, and then we'll share them together.
Great, we have some comments coming in. Pivotal moments of choice and the capacity to switch. And we had two more from the previous, which was another way to frame an important concept and reinforcing active position in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Maggie shares that it's a clear path to choice. And Brittany shares it's the power of choice. And Mark shares that the power of our choice between stimulus and response, from Viktor Frankl.
Yeah, let me stop you there. There's this wonderful quote, which I may not get right, but Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and our happiness. And everything we're doing here is taking apart the automaticity of usually stimulus and response. And one of my favorite comments in a workshop once at the end, where someone said, my aperture got bigger. If you expand your ability to choose, really, that's what grants us our humanity rather than simply being on automatic. So thank you for that reminder. Any other comments?
Oh yes, and we have a reminder of the constant opportunity to choose my reactions and undo something that I regret.
Yeah.
And we have the awareness of choice and a reminder to be a continuous learner. And Marty just shared that everything that happens on my aging journey is a learning opportunity. Sometimes negatives can be the best teachers.
Oh, that's true. That's for sure. And what I'm hoping is that this gives you maybe some more clarity about helping people in your workshops recognize ageism and agefulness when they're being judger and the possibility of being learner, so that you can offer them expanded possibilities for really taking advantage of what it is that you have the privilege of being able to share with them. So I'd like to do one more thing before we close out. And if you recall, in the beginning, I had you put your hand on your chest like this. Feel the heat of your chest in your hand. Feel the rising and falling of your chest as you breathe in and as you breathe out. And then we took that energy and we expanded it, and I'd like you to do this again, into the circle of energy and connection that we are in this webinar. And now we're going to add another layer. So you make your arms a little bit bigger, and now you can expand it to the participants in your workshops. And then you can expand that circle bigger to the people that they influence in their lives, and give you a very big idea of, you can put your arms down now, a very big idea of what you're really up to in leading the conscious aging workshops and the possibilities that it represents, not just for the people in the workshops, but for the people they touch and the people they touch. And so that's why I've been so inspired to be thinking about age, to be coming up with this new term, age-fulness, to get awake in ways that I personally wasn't before, and also have the opportunity to interact with you around all of this. So I thank you for that. And let's go on to, oh, my computer is just starting its scheduled scan. Let's see if I can get it to stop. This does not happen. Oh, run later. Whoops. Uh-oh. Can you see me?
Yeah, you're still broadcasting.
Okay, well, I can't see you, but that's okay. Can you bring up the what's next for Inquiry Institute?
Absolutely. There you are.
Oh, I can see it now. So use the choice map to help you stay in learner and switch to judger when you want, and to practice that over and over and over. Then we have some courses coming up, the foundation course, which is 4 sessions in a week, and also the practice workshop, which is in August. You'll get information about this as well. Here's my email, so if you have any questions, please do email me and I'll be happy and look forward to getting those. And also sign up for our newsletter so that you can be kept up to date with blogs and interviews and different things that we offer, including those Monday night conversations that I mentioned, which are free and which have been wonderful to be able to provide. And we've had people from Thailand and New Zealand and all over the place joining us for those, we call them compassionate and connecting conversations. And then, Dom, I think there were some things that you wanted to extend and talk about Mark's workshop that's coming up.
Yes, and we would love to invite you all for the Noetic Wisdom for Challenging Times series. It continues on July 16th. This particular webinar is titled Noetic Approaches to Aging. It will be on Thursday, July 16th from 11 a.m. to 12:15 p.m. and it's free and open for all. And we invite you to join us in this free interactive webinar as we explore shifting our consciousness away from self-limitation, lack, isolation, and fear, and towards expansiveness, inclusiveness, wholeness, connection, and compassion. And it'll be led by IONS Conscious Aging facilitators Mark Blessoff, Elizabeth White, and Evelina Everidge. So we hope you join us there. And as Marilee noted, we'll be including all of these resources and registration links and Marilee's contact information in the follow-up email along with the recording. So please stay tuned for that. We'll likely send that out later today or tomorrow. And it looks like we have lots of time left.
I'm so pleased and surprised. This is really great. So we do have time for questions and or comments, and I would love to hear them.
And if you'd like to chat in or raise your Zoom hand or your real hand or any other kind of hand, we'll be looking out.
I don't know what other kind of hand you might be referring to.
A little, one of those sports, the styrofoam ones.
Oh, okay. No, I don't have one of those.
Looks like. Oh, great. Rosalind has her hand up. I'm still having trouble unmuting you. If you unmute, there you go. Perfect.
So I'm loving this, of course. So I was thinking about, at first I was thinking, well, it's kind of a duality. I can be in judgy place, or I can be in yeah, right, learner, inquirer. But then once you put that passage in, it's as though I can now warp time. So when you go into that inquiry place, or that passage, I forget what you call it, switcher.
Switching lane, yeah.
You know, that third alternative, it's allowing a time warp where I can go into this place that's unknown until I get there. And then when I get into it, all these other possibilities and questions come up. So I'm in neither for a little while. And I love that idea that it interrupts the duality, and allows, and just hugely expansive into all kinds of thoughts, possibilities, even conversations that can occur if I pause in the switcher place.
I love what you just said, that these aren't your exact words, but it kind of neutralizes duality. And that's very intentional here. In fact, I've used the choice map. I've spoken to all the mediators in the Navy and all the mediators in the FBI, and I use this and teach this for mediation, because judger is inevitably going to bring you into conflict, and learner is going to give you the possibility of connecting and having an even playing field. And so I love speaking in places like that, because they don't actually know the power of what they're getting. It's, but it works, and lots of them use it that way. And where we don't want to be is in duality. We don't want to be in, watch the news, how much oppositional thinking and behaving, how much polarization occurs. And if you can find the heart and the bandwidth to step into learner in the midst of all that, it's a wonderful thing. Not only is it good for your, you can think of this as heart-centered thinking. So there's cognitive thinking and there's heart-based thinking. And this is a way, this is a model of wholeness, not a model of just being positive. So when you're in a model of wholeness and you're centered and you're present, then miracles can occur that I don't think can occur other ways. So thank you, Rosalind. That was really eloquent, what you just said. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosalind. We had a question coming in from Mark about, can you speak to empathy in this choice situation?
Absolutely. That the switching lane is the lane where what happens in switching is we're pulling forward empathy, compassion, acceptance, forgiveness. There's no other way to switch authentically. So that when we step into learner, we literally pull those qualities with us if it's going to be authentic. It also, let me see how much time I have, because I could riff a long time on that. But it's also, I'll just say, it's also the basis of emotional and social intelligence and curiosity and empathy. How could you possibly have emotional intelligence if you weren't aware, which is the first step, and curious, and then you develop empathy? So emotional intelligence, awareness, self-regulation, and self-management, that's the switching lane. And then social awareness, awareness of the other, and then social skills. So empathy and compassion is the basis of that, along with patience, acceptance, and forgiveness. And Mark, thank you for giving me the opportunity to say that. Okay. So someone wrote, the switching lane can also be a transformative experience, a conscious aging chapter. It can be a transformational experience. So I want to be respectful of the time here. Is there anything that, let's just do it again, one word in chat, what you're leaving with today, what's opened up for you, what your experience is, what you're leaving with. And Dom, you can start sharing them as they come in, if you would.
Perfect. So we have balance, We have confirmation.
Mhm.
And Joanne asked, would you think that sometimes the learner set would be a choice to stay silent?
Mhm.
Virginia shares that she loves the choice map visual. And Rosalind shared the word expansion. Millie shared that this has been hugely impactful for my circle of friends right now. They don't know it yet, but they will. And Maggie shares the word choices. I see community. James shares positive growth and challenge. And Brittany shares an eagerness to revisit your book again.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
So that takes us up to the hour, yes?
That's perfect. Yeah.
So let me thank you for your engagement. It's really been great fun and very expansive for me, and I've learned a lot. And I love the opportunity to contribute to Conscious Aging Program and to IONS, which is a community that I love and benefit from on a regular basis. And I look forward to seeing you all in some of the other IONS webinars, and hopefully in person at a conference next year or the year after, when life resumes in a way that we can actually see and touch each other in person. So thank you all.